Hello, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. It feels like days, months, and years since I have been on a microphone,
Me
let
too.
alone with this beauty over here. I'm Luce, he's Juice. Buddy, we're talking about a Cubs loss, and we'll get into all that in just a moment. But before we get started, how are you doing, my friend?
Good, man. Went to the friendly confines this weekend, though there wasn't a baseball game. Saw Morgan Wallen. He was great. It was a fun time. Way funner than tonight's ball game. But yeah, man, things are good. They came back with a split, even though they probably in that locker room, they were probably saying probably should have taken two there. But David Ross started a first baseman who could catch today. And, things are trending maybe in the right direction. I know tonight it's easy to look at it and go, man, like, here we go again. But I'm going to tell you why later on in the show that I think that this is a time that they could really go on a huge run.
Spicy, but I like it. Before we get into this whole thing here, our friend of the classic friend of the program here, Mr. Jeremiah, saying he blames tonight on the smoke, and we'll get to that here in just a second. He also says just started listening to Morgan Wallen, Mr. Juice. So
yeah, he's a great show too. If you ever get a chance to take in any of his music live, he does a great job. It was incredible to be in left field and on the field at Wrigley Field. I haven't been there since I played catch with my dad, like when I was 5. But I'll say this, as the Cubs on Tap historical protector of Wrigley Field, I told probably 30 people not to touch the ivy over the course of the show. Because, if you touch it, it's the oils in your hand can kill the roots on the ivy. It could actually turn it brown. So there were a bunch of people who were touching it and trying to grab like a little piece of it. I was the first person to say, hey, I wouldn't touch that. You can kill it. And they were like, well, what do you mean? And I educated a couple people. The oils from your hands, they get into the ivy and they turn it brown. So don't touch the ivy.
Look at you, Juice.
I had to.
Educating the public.
I had to do it as a Cub fan. I mean, when we're playing baseball deep in the season this year, we want to have, at least a little ivy that's staying out there. So we got to preserve it for the playoff run here.
Absolutely, my friend. And let's talk a little bit about that, right? Because it's been a hot minute since we've been on the show. Obviously, friends of ours and our co-hosts here, Mr. Tyler and Joey, did a great job on Sunday night, holding down that show, discussing the split, as you mentioned, over across the pond with our friends in London. And I think we are just starting to see again, it's the case of the post-London fog, as tonight's episode is titled. That might be a triple entendre. I don't know if I did that perfectly or properly or not. We might have gotten there because London fog is a hell of a drink. I don't know if you've ever had it before. It's really good. It's a tea drink. It's delicious. The Cubs are in a London fog of coming back because Rob Manfred's a jackass, only scheduling one off day in between, 2 international flights in 4 days.
Thank God they got 2 before, though. They get 2 before.
Yeah, you get 2 before, but you don't get any. You don't get 1 after, and then they tell you go play ball. And then it was also foggy as shit in the Midwest because obviously the air quality is not so great for those that maybe aren't in our neck of the woods that listen to Cubs on Tap. The Midwest is just getting pummeled thanks to the wildfires up in Canada, similar to what New York had happened just a few weeks back, where all the images were on Twitter, apocalyptic town and all that chaos. I don't think it's as bad as it was in New York, but it's still pretty bad. It's still not fun. Noticeable haze in the air. I, for one, am somebody who has had asthma in my lifetime. I did not have fun today. Thankfully, I stayed inside the entire day because I just knew. I was like, this is not going to end well if I go outside. So I did not. But Juice, you got a W from Jeremiah for your Morgan Wallen, and he's also handing out L's to our friends over in Canada. Nonetheless, Juice, let's talk some baseball finally. It's only been about 6 minutes into this podcast, and we barely touched on the
It's been a while since I saw you. We had some things to talk about.
It has. We had to catch up on some things again because of the amount of off days built in with the London series. I feel like we, as just the Cubs on Tap show in general, have only had 5 shows in the last 2.5 weeks now. It's been a weird kind of break for us who are used to going at least Tuesday through pretty much Sunday minus Saturdays and on the occasional Friday. So let's dive into this one, Juice. And I think we got to start with the pitching, right? Because you go from the London series where you had the Cubs' 2 best pitchers on the mound. Steele looked great on Saturday. Obviously, that led to a Cubs W. Strode looked good. Outside of a first baseman that can't play first base, there's probably a chance that he gets the win in that game. Exits early with a blister. The Cubs don't seem concerned. The report was that they expect him to make his next start. So all is fine and dandy with Marcus Stroman there. No big concerns coming out of that camp. But then you come back and say, okay, this is when the rest of the lineup, or the rest of the rotation kind of starts to fill out, because Stroh got to more or less skip over a couple of guys to start in London. Now we get Tyone, obviously tonight. We have Smiley tomorrow, and it'll be Kyle Hendricks on Thursday. So the rest of the rotation will take their places here in this series. And Jameson Tyone had a weird start tonight, Juice. I think that's where we need to start here, because there was, again, moments where you understand why the Cubs paid him $17 million a year. It felt like a lot of that for most of the start, truthfully. He had some really good looks, still had 8 strikeouts tonight, only walked 1 batter. But he just, his biggest problem, at least in my opinion, Juice, has been he just gives up too much hard contact and too many fly balls that right now are resulting in home runs, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing if you're giving up the fly ball and it's just a casual fly out and it is what it is. But right now, these are not just fly balls. They are hard hit fly balls that are now resulting in runs. 7 hits given up, 5 earned runs tonight. That's all the Phillies needed to take care of this one, because the Cubs offense was anemic. Again, our post-London fog comment coming back into play here. Do you think, Juice, and again, I want you to, go ahead on a little rant here. Give us your thoughts overall on what Tyone looked like, not only tonight, but so far this season. But do you think in the end that Tyone this season, because we've seen this with pitchers in the past that signed with the Cubs, i.e. Yu Darvish, and others, year one's always a little rough. Do you think we get the best version of Jameson Tyone this season as a Cub, or do you think we have to wait to 2024 to see the $17 million man pitch like a $17 million man?
Well, if they're going to make the playoffs, he's going to have to pick up the ball every 5th day and perform. There's no question about that. As much talent as there is down in the minor leagues with pitching, we watched a guy like Jordan Wicks get his promotion today. Great article at On Tap Sportsnet for that as well. Make sure you guys are going over there to read that about the promotion. Yes, but they're going to need him to pick up the ball, because there's nobody really ready down there to take that over. And I know that we've done the whole Hayden Wesneski part, but Hayden's problem is that he's going to have to learn how to throw to lefties. And being a starter, everyone's just going to load that with left-handed batters, and that's a problem. That's a problem that you fix over the offseason. And you can, for the course of this year, figure out a time within the ball game where you can put him in and have him succeed. With Tyone, to me, as I watch, I see a lot of problems with the delivery. And you talk a lot about the high hit rate. And he doesn't walk as many as I thought he would end up walking for a strikeout pitcher normally in every start. But the problem is that he does not miss outside of the plate. He misses in the heart of the plate often. And no matter what, no matter if you're throwing 97, 96 with run, whatever, if you're missing in that heart of the plate, big league hitters are going to hit it hard somewhere. That's exactly what they're looking for, especially now. Now with the breaking stuff and the different types of velocity and movement that these guys can do, a lot of guys just look middle and just say, hey, if I get whatever I get in the middle, that's my shot. I got to either barrel it up if it's a curveball or if it's something off speed or if it's a fastball. I got to be ready for it. They just sit dead middle fastball and they say, I'll just get the barrel out if it's off speed in the middle. And with my strength, usually I can, get something out to the outfield and get a knock. Right. And that just seems to happen to Tylen a lot. It's something with the delivery. And I always like to read into Marquis really closely in terms of, I like to hear what like JD says and what the guys say up in the press box, because for a fact that like they sit and they watch these guys throw bullpens. They watch them take batting practice. And the only thing I've heard every time that Tylen's out is about his delivery. And I don't know what he's working on. And I don't know if he's just flying open or, he's just not sequenced the right way. So he's leaving things in the center of the plate. But I'll tell you right now, like as I watch him, he looks out of sync. He looks very much, but that's a problem because, and two, I think a lot of this can stem from the fact that he did get hurt. He did miss some starts, and it is an unfamiliar spring training for him. It's the first year with a big league club. It's learning new names. It's learning new catchers. It's learning your surroundings. There's a lot to be said about what is different for his season this year. And pitchers are creatures of habit. They are the guys who pick up the fifth ball or pick up the start every fifth day, and they throw the baseball. And the ones who get in a groove are the ones who are comfortable. That's just exactly what it is.
Right.
And as I watch him, I see that. But the problem is that I don't think currently right now that there's a prospect that the Cubs could look at and say, do this. And I don't think with how much he's getting paid that they're going to allow that to happen. They have to let him figure it out. This deal still has multiple years on it that they have to figure out. And you got to get something out of him. We'll propose something, though, and I start to wonder if he would end up being a decent high leverage 3-inning guy. And I know we keep talking about all of these different, but he does have great stuff. And at a time when maybe you needed a strikeout with his strikeout numbers, he wouldn't be the last one on that team that I'd be like, yeah, you can't send him out there, but with that amount of money, they're going to let him pitch all the way in. That's a postseason thing I'm talking about. That's not something that they're going to do during the season. He's going to pitch. But I like what they did. They kind of worked the rotation so that series against Milwaukee, they're kind of putting their best feet forward, it seems like, because if you follow the games that in a potential, probable starters, it's their best four that are going to start that series, and that's kind of what you want against a division leader at the current time too. So I think too, baseball's weird, and it's like I said earlier, it's a creature of habit, and this whole London thing just throws a huge wrench into everything. It's weird. Everybody's got to go out there. Like imagine if you're Tyone, like you're not pitching, but you had to go out there. You had to you had to do the press, you had to be tired, and then you had to come home. And the day before is your only off day, but it's not an off day because I'm sure he goes in and reads scouting report, or he, does a workout, does something before his start, before the Monday, which would the day before his start. So yeah, I think that I think too, like a lot of this is routine based, but I do see some stuff with his delivery too that I just go, I wonder what he's working on currently.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like you look at his game logs, and that's kind of what I've pulled up here, Juice, while you were discussing. The longest outing he's had of the year is 6 innings, and he's only done that once. He is a 5 2/3 guy, pretty much through and through. Obviously, there's been much lesser throughout the course of the year. There's a couple of 2 1/3. There's a 2 2/3 innings in there. It really does feel like that. Especially when you think back to it, right? I think back to all the spring training content that the Cubs put out on their YouTube channel. The discussions with various guys, right? The Rick Sutcliffe mic'd up with Tom Hod, with Mr. Hodavy and watching Stroh through the bullpen, right? And talking through catching with Girardi and Barnhart and all that stuff. Sutcliffe and Girardi talked to Tyone. And he said one of the reasons that he wanted to sign with the Cubs is because they gave him things that they thought he could do better.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it's just him trying to work on that during the season. And because of that process, I don't want to say the term backfiring, but it's sporadic, right? Like there's been good starts he's had. I think of that Dodgers start,
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah, he was great. He 5 2/3. Like I think at this point, for a guy that might be working on stuff, like you said, Juice, if he can go 5 2/3 and gives up 2 runs, that's perfect case scenario, right? Maybe 3 runs. We'll call it 3 runs. If he's a 3 ERA pitcher, that's awesome. Like I'll take that at this point, especially if he's trying to work on stuff and kind of finically work his way through things. But like you said, the stuff is clearly there. He still struck out 8 guys tonight. Mm-hmm. He only walked 1. Like
in a tough Philly lineup. Like what's right. That up and down that Philly line is. Ron, you were talking about that. I attribute a lot of what you're talking about to like, and you know it, and I know it. We both play golf. It's like when you learn a new golf swing. You do what you feel is comfortable to you. But when you have a pro who looks at your swing and says, hey, you got to keep that elbow in, or hey, you're too over the top, or you got to get that swing flat, or you got to throw you're opening up your hips too early. Your body, when you get out there and you're competing, is going to do what it's comfortable with, what it thinks is right. So yeah, I think that like it's a matter of that. Like maybe they told him something in his delivery, and he's like, that makes so much sense. And in his bullpen, he probably feels really comfortable about it. But when he gets out there, it's like, hey man, like, I'm going to do what I'm comfortable with because this is what I've done my whole career, and I'm in between, and that's the problem that I kind of see. I kind of related to a golfer that is changing his swing, and in the moment of pressure, in the moment of things when there's guys on the bases or when, it's a high pressure moment against a big hitter, you're going to go back to what you're comfortable with. And clearly that's not working because maybe he's in his head a little bit. Maybe he's doing some of the things that the Cubs told him to do, but then he's also doing one thing differently and that's what's throwing him off. Maybe he's out of sync with his lower body or where he's supposed to be landing on the mound. There's a lot that goes into pitching that, I only know a certain small little teeny tiny amount, but I know for a fact that all of those, and then to get back into the wonderful juice food analogies, all the ingredients come in to bake the cake, right? And if you don't have sugar in the cake, it's going to taste like shit. And if you don't have frosting and it's just the cake, someone's going to say, well, where the hell is the frosting? That's a problem. And that's what, as you watch him over and over and over again, I don't sit and say, man, this guy sucks. I almost feel bad. And I'm like, man, like I could see a 1, 2, 3 inning where he seems comfortable. And then I see him miss his spot by, 2 balls, 3 balls, and it's getting taken just mammoth shots. Also, too, Brandon Marsh, Cub killer. That guy is on my list. But I'll say this, man, like I almost, in some ways, I know you can't see and the results aren't there, but there's moments where I'm like, he's close. And if he can get close, this Cubs team is going to be, they don't have a chance to win, every 5th day.
100%. I think you nailed it on the head, Juice. I love the golf analogy. I think that's a good way of putting it because, again, there are so many things in sports as a whole that are just, it's muscle memory and consistency, right? Pitching, that is muscle memory and consistency, right? Golf is the same way. You could think about a tennis player, right? And their swing off a serve versus how they play their backhand. Same thing. Hockey, right? How you rip a shot, how your technique works. It's muscle memory. Muscle memory is such a key in every aspect of sport, in my opinion.
Sure.
And so for a guy, when you're tinkering with that, like you said, your body fights the what's comfortable versus what I'm trying to recreate. And you have to find that balance. And I think that's where Tyone is stuck right now, because again, we're seeing it. 8 Ks. He still struck out 8 motherfuckers tonight and only walked 1. Like he had for moments tonight, he looked really good. And things didn't really go off the rails until later in his start. He still got through 5 innings, with not atrocious results. I agree with you. I think he's close. It's just frustrating while this team is like hovering around 500 when you're just like,
Yeah.
Like now is the perfect time for him to figure it out, because like you said, Juice, once he does, this is probably the most confident I felt in a Cubs pitching rotation 1 through 5 since the 2015, 16, 17 Cubs, if we're being brutally honest.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's I think too, what's so exciting about it is this, and I hate to call them that, but in some ways is maybe the B squad. You look at all the talent that is in the minors, Jordan Wicks and Ben Brown, and I know we've seen it in flashes from Caleb Killian at times, but
Cade Horton.
We could just which he's a lot of fun, and also Michael Arias got promoted today too. I'm going to get to see him, and he was electric in low A. A lot of good stuff there too. But yeah, like I think that, and I hate to call them that because they're playing so well and pitching so well, but I mean the Cubs are doing a lot of this without, I think, what are going to be huge contributors in the future to this pitching staff. I mean, obviously you're going to want to supplement with guys like Stroh, hand that man his bag already. Our man Justin Steele is another guy that I hope they keep around for a long time. They have a lot of control on him for a while, so maybe they're not going to look to re-sign him just yet, but that's another guy. But I mean, you look up and down, like, I mean, Smiley, journeyman, you look at Tyone, like he's been what he is. And Kyle Hendricks is a battler. It's been fantastic since he's come back, but no one's expecting Kyle to be a pitcher like this for the entire rest of the season. I hope he does. I hope I'm wrong, but I mean, there's going to be bumps in the road for a guy like that. And I think Kyle would even admit that, guys like Ben Brown and Jordan Wicks and, Cade Horton, like you met, like they have more special tools than he does. Maybe the brain and him able to think through a baseball game is more valuable to him, and he has that experience. But he'd be the first to tell you that, like, if his body was in, Ben Brown's and he had his mind in a Ben Brown, he'd be unstoppable. It's one of those. It's just Kyle's makeup that way. He thinks through hitters because that's what he has. So I mean, you're realistically looking at 3 guys at the back of this rotation that you're like, it's an island of misfit toys in some ways. It's Kyle Hendricks coming off an injury. It's Jameson Tyone, who has been, working through some stuff, and Drew Smiley, who is a journeyman. He's been great, and he's been so valuable for what the Cubs have gotten out of him. But this isn't what you're going to have for the future. It's the hors d'oeuvres. It's the first kind of little run here of your entrees before, you start to get like the filet mignon wrapped in bacon, and that's the 95-mile-an-hour fastball guy with the sweeping curve. Like, that's kind of where you're at, and they're doing a hell of a job competing. And because of that, I'll just get into my point of why I think that, like, this next run of, I'm going to say 5 weeks of baseball that we're sitting in, everything's going to go back to normal. The Cubs are done with all their little bullshit, go over the pond to play 2 games, come back, have to play 30 games in a row, it seemed like in the beginning of the year, to just make up for the fact that you need 3 off days and, a span of 5 days. But the Cubs play, this is a tough series. The Phillies are very, very good. They've been a good baseball team for a while. But you're getting Cleveland after that. I mean, we know the AL Central. You're getting the Brewers in a 4-game set after that, which they are Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You don't know what you're getting.
Facts.
The Yankees are a good baseball team, but it's beatable. Then you get the All-Star break. And listen to this run of games. 3 games set against Boston, a 3-game set against the Nationals,
Yep.
a 4-game set against the Cardinals, who you should have beat the shit out of, an off day, 2 against the White Sox, which, I mean, they don't scare you, 4 against the Cardinals again, followed by another set going into August, a 4-game set against the Cardinals or against the Reds. That's a run. I'm telling you right now, you could look up at yourself after that month if you just take care of business and win series, and you're looking at maybe a 5-game lead after that if you play your cards right. Because there's a lot of winnable baseball come July. It's been a tough schedule before then, and after that it's going to be difficult, don't get me wrong. But this is your time to play your best ball now. And I think they are right there. They're going to come off of that trade deadline, and maybe they'll have some assets after that too, that they're adding to this team. But I'll tell you what, man, like there's a lot of winnable baseball games coming up, and they're just like James and Tyon. They're close. They're real close.
Yeah, 100%. And to add on to that, Juice, you mentioned the month of July. We'll call it a tough stretch against the Reds because they're playing really well right now. Obviously, we don't know if that's going to last over the course of the next month, but still 4 against the Reds, and they're also at home. I think that's worth noting. You got 3 against the Braves at home then that following weekend. And yes, you play a lot of road baseball. You're in New York, you're in Toronto. You're back home for 2 with the White Sox. A lot of off days mixed in August. But like you look at the overall schedule, Juice, it's the Braves, yes, but the Mets who have underachieved. The Blue Jays who are kind of this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde team as well so far this year. The White Sox again, this time at Wrigley. 3 with the Royals who are not good. The Tigers on the road for 3, not good. And then 4 with the Pirates who you have now swept over 6 games so far this season. And then you finish the month out with 3 against the Brewers. So there is a lot of chance, as you mentioned, Juice, I think, for a lot of good baseball to come ahead for the Cubs over the next 2 months. Again, assuming they take that momentum, I think that they've built in June. And like you said, they've gotten the weird travel out of the way of going to London and coming back. This is a time for this team to go on a run and really do some things. Quickly, from the comments here, Juice, before we keep talking a little bit about tonight's game. Scott said earlier he blames tonight's loss on Buzz rooting for the Cardinals. I don't know what that's about, but yeah, Buzz is in St. Louis. That is what it is. He's there for reasons. The umps did dirty all game to Morrell, according to Jeremiah. Agreed. He got roughed up tonight. And then Jeremiah, the biggest news of the day was Jordan Wicks going to Iowa. Maybe it is because I think, again, some of these guys, if this Cubs team's competitive, I think late in the season, Juice, Ben Brown, Jordan Wicks, like I think there's guys that we can see in a bullpen role. Like I think we can, especially with the injuries to the bullpen too now.
Yeah,
right?
now Brandon Hughes on the 60-day.
Hughes is done for the year. Hoyer's done for the year because of some weird elbow injury that he got. It wasn't TJ, but it's something else. Like they have lost out on a lot of key guys that they thought were going to contribute to this bullpen. If they are competitive, this might be the time that, especially like late August into September, I think we could see a Wicks or a Brown and those guys come up and throw, 2 innings every other couple days and be assets out of the bullpen. Like I think that's a real possibility this year, knowing that they can reset and get ready to be quote unquote starters next year. And whether that's at the AAA level, whether it's in the MLB, whatever it is, and go from there. But Juice, quickly, just one other point on tonight's game before we go ahead and look ahead, because I think we all want to put this one behind us. The bats were anemic tonight. Obviously, we've mentioned the post-London fog. You only get 1 day off between coming back. Obviously, the time change, in theory, helps you, but still, it's an 8-hour flight. Like that's a lot.
It's a wash at that point.
It's a wash. You're still getting home late Sunday night Chicago time. You get 1 day off to try to reacclimate to the 6-hour difference in terms of time, and then you go back to work at Wrigley Field. Horner delivers with a big RBI tonight. the lone run for this Cubs team, his only hit of the evening. But as we mentioned, right, 0 for 3 for Suzuki, 0 for 3 for Happ, 0 for 4 for Morel. Swanson managed a hit, 0 for 4 for Mancini with a trio of Ks. Belly, maybe the only player that didn't get screwed up by the travel. He was 2 for 4 on the night. Jan Gomes 0 for 3, Madrigal 2 for 3 on this one. So again, just anemic offense. 4 of your 6 hits coming from just 2 players. There just wasn't, unfortunately, a lot going. And even though the Phillies really didn't do a ton of damage, it was just a couple of long balls and a bloop hit here and there that really changed this whole thing. But just the bats were feeling the time change. And I think it was very clear tonight that the offense just didn't have it because, between, I'm sure the weather played a fact in it with all the smog coming from Canada. I'm surprised to an extent that they actually played this game, if I'm being entirely frank. It just was a bad night for the bats, Juice. Bad night for the bats.
Yeah, and you're gonna have that every couple nights. You gotta tip your cap to the starting pitcher too. But I mean, they hit some balls. They hit some balls hard tonight. Sometimes it was just right at people. I don't know. I think that you're right. I think you're right that it's probably very tough for a hitter to make that whole trek back and then expect to come and perform in a different venue when you're not set to, back at your own home ballpark. And I said too that the Cubs are catching the Phillies at a bad time. They won 7 of their last 10. So I mean, it was not a good time to catch that Phillies team right now. But I mean, you play the schedule the way it's put out there, and there's going to be a night where it makes up for tonight, and hopefully that's tomorrow, right? Now your hope is just, hey, let's just win 2 in a row here. Let's win 2 in a row, take 2 or 3 of the series, and everything's fine. And you'll probably look at the fact that you're around 500. I want them to be right around 500 with a chance to go 500 during that Cleveland series, because I think Cleveland really doesn't scare me. They really don't. They don't have a lot within that team, and they're not playing very well. They're playing very average baseball. It's time to beat up on that. It seems like every other team in our division, too, has played the AL Central, and I feel like we haven't had our fix yet. So yeah. It's a lot of that, too, that division is just – I mean, everybody talks about ours, and ours is bad. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot, but that division is bad. And then you look at some of the rosters too, and you're like, there's a reason that division is that bad. You look at the Cardinals roster, you're like, man, that looks like a playoff team. You look at the Brewers, and you're like, man, like they have great pitching. You look at the Cubs, and they did a lot over the course of the offseason, and the Reds have all this young talent. Yeah. And but like you look up and down that whole division, you're like, makes sense why a lot of that division's bad, because a lot of them are trying to be bad, all things considered. I mean, the White Sox are not, the Twins are not, but tell me a baseball team that has gone out and spent astronomical amounts of money in that division to win it. I mean, the Tigers have been rebuilding since they went to the World Series, what seems like 20 years ago. And the Royals they won the World Series recently in 2015, was it 2015? Yeah, 2015. But I mean, they've gutted everything, and they're not really trying to win, and they're trying to add some more, depth to their farm system. And then you got the White Sox, who are they baffle me. They should be a lot better than they are, but I mean, they're very inconsistent. And they're flawed. You look at their roster, and they're pretty flawed, but. I mean, it makes sense, and I look at like our division. I'm like, man, like I feel like we've watched, the Brewers and the Reds like play those games against the Tigers, and I'm like, man, I want to play those. I want to play the Royals, right? Like,
right.
And those are the ones that you make hay on, and you come back and you get your record back towards 500. Meanwhile, it seems like we're playing San Diego or we're playing the Phillies all the time, and you did that whole West Coast trip where you had to play the A's when they were playing better baseball, and the Giants when the Giants were 4 or 5 games over 500. So I look at the schedule and I'm like, man, like the Cubs weathered a lot of the storm. Now it's time to take control of the division. And there's going to be some reinforcements to this team. I think they've pretty much announced that they're not selling. I think they're going to be buying. It'll be a discussion on the show at what level they'll buy, if they'll buy at the high level or they'll buy at the low level. But I do think that the Cubs, for the most part, will probably be adding to this ball club. But yeah, the bats, just to go back to the original conversation we were having, the bats, it's definitely some London fallout, some fog, some smog, whatever you want to call it. Little lazy dogs out there, man. I just did a little rhyme that I didn't know made any sense, but you know what? Hey, man, tomorrow's another baseball game. Let's go and hit them tomorrow.
I completely agree with you, Juice. Any final remarks on this game before we go ahead and look ahead?
I will say that I did send out a tweet over the weekend after watching the game on Sunday. Congrats to Ian Happ for losing the earpiece. Because if I had to talk to A-Rod during a little break, yeah, I would be throwing that thing into left field or somewhere in Eastern Europe so that no one could find it. I don't blame him for losing it because I am sold. If we got Ian Happ in a bar and gave some true serum, he didn't lose that. He pretty much made sure of it.
I saw that tweet as well, and it made me giggle for sure over the course of the weekend. My final thought, Juice, I agree with you. Cubs are just going to get back on track. This series is coming at a weird time because of the travel and everything. They had a bad night, but overall, this ball club's been playing really well, and things I think are going to look up here in the near future. And they have a chance to do that tomorrow night because against the Phillies once again on Wednesday, June 28th. It's a 7:05 start here in Chicago from beautiful Wrigley Field. You can watch this one and catch this one both on audio and video in the local normal suspects for both markets in Philly and in Chicago. On the bump for the Phils, it is Aaron Nola, the right-hander, 6-5 on the season with 4.38 ERA, 98 Ks so far on this one. And as for the Cubbies, as we mentioned a little bit earlier in the show, it's Drew Smiley, the lefty on the mound, 7-4 on the season with 3.38 ERA. Again, highlighting how good he has been for the Cubbies so far this season. He also has a very nice amount of Ks this year with 69 strikeouts on the season. Juice, what do the Cubbies need to do tomorrow to get a dub against the Phils?
I'm looking at Seiya Suzuki. I want to see Seiya Suzuki become the type of player that can carry a team for a span of a week or 2 weeks. And I know he has it in him, and I know there's been an adjustment period, and he was hurt. But, like, I see some of his at-bats, and I'm like, man, like, I want him to be the guy. And they need to figure out what level of contribution they can get from him before the end of this year, because they need to know if this guy is ascending or this player is who he is. Because if he is who he is, he's still a very good baseball player. But they're going to need to add a prime time hitter to supplement him as well, to kind of be that person who takes the pressure off of him. I think in a lot of ways they thought that they were getting that with him, a guy that can just place in the middle of the order and slug, and we haven't seen it yet, and that's okay. But now as I look at the Cubs for the next couple runs of weeks here, I want to see Seiya Suzuki get hot. I really do, because when he is playing well, I don't want to say that I know the record offhand, but I would imagine that when he contributes and hits a home run, the odds of the Cubs winning is probably very high, because he's hitting the middle of that lineup, providing that power and doing damage. A lot of times with this pitching staff, you're just looking for your middle guys to come through, and the pitching staff can do the rest. So I'm looking at Seiya Suzuki. Get hot, man. Like, this is a great time to do it. Get hot right before the All-Star break, get a little rest, and then continue that, as it goes through the year here. And just one of these times, just put the team on your back. I want so badly to get on one of these shows after and go, the Seiya Suzuki game for the title. And I'm waiting for it, and it's coming. He's a good player, but I want to see him be a great player, and I don't want to put everything on one hitter because it's baseball and there's 9 of them, but I want to see him come through and have a nice game tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm gonna double down on what you said there, Juice, and for this reason, right? Because we look at the course of this roster, and guys have stepped up at various moments throughout the season, and we've seen a little bit. We've been teased a little bit by what Seiya Suzuki I think can be. Mind you, Seiya Suzuki, just like Jameson Tyone, who we just talked very extensively about here on the show, also $17 million a year man, right? He is paid to be that guy. He is paid to be a staple in the heart of this order. It would be nice to, I think, from the Cubs perspective, as you mentioned earlier, as well as from just even a fan perspective, to understand what kind of player is Seiya Suzuki, right? Is he yes, you can plug him in the middle of the lineup. He can carry your team for 2 weeks if you need him to. He's that guy. Or is he a supplemental piece at, again, $17 million a year, where you need to find other bats to carry him more in that middle of that order? And maybe he is better suited in that 5, 6, 7 role versus a 3, 4, 5 role. So I agree with you. I think seeing Seiya Suzuki come around will be good. I think Seiya Suzuki is also the guy that if he gets hot, the rest of the lineup finds a way to get hot too, just because of how things work out and guys feeding off each other. It's summer in Chicago. Hopefully, this stupid fucking smog gets out of the air here soon, and we get back to some normal Chicago weather in the month of June and July, and then the wind starts to blow out a little bit, and hopefully the baseball does as well.
Yeah, they could blow the NASCAR people out of here too while they're at it. That whole dude. Quick, how are you getting to work? It's got to be a nightmare.
That's the beauty of if you work from home, you don't have to worry about that. So
that's I know, but
it's trust me, it's a mess. I will be the first to say I had tickets for Sunday's game. I had tickets for Thursday's game. I have actually gotten rid of both of them because I know what the city's going to look like over the next 5 days because of the race being here in Chicago this weekend, because Miss Lori Lightfoot thought it was a good idea. Let's have a street race in Chicago instead of using beautiful Chicagoland Speedway that's just sitting there collecting dust. That it's going to be a mess. So I am for one going to stay away. Juice, one thing I don't want the people to stay away from is us here at On Tap Sportsnet, because Cubs on Tap is one of 2 official Cubs podcasts of the On Tap Sports Network. You can check out our friends over at the Dingers podcast. They were live yesterday. If you didn't catch that show, you can find them on YouTube, wherever you find your podcasts, etc. Be sure to follow them as well at Dinger Cubs on Twitter and Instagram. Be sure to follow us at Cubbies on Tap on Twitter and Instagram. Luce on Tap, Juice on Tap, Teddy Freddy 270, Joey Knows Nothing, at Nick _ on tap, and Bulls guy Rob, who Juice shouted out a little bit earlier, been writing some good prospect articles here over the last couple of days, weeks, and months. Be sure to follow all of us who contribute here at Cubs on Tap. Bulls, Bears, Blackhawks, you know the deal. We got it all. Bulls, big week, and NBA free agency opens on Friday. Blackhawks, perhaps an even bigger week. Officially, tomorrow is the NHL draft on Wednesday. It's round number 1. Hawks are on the clock with the number 1 overall pick. It will be presumed Mr. Connor Bedard, the face of the franchise of the future. They have a second first-round pick on Wednesday night as well, and then a shit ton of picks on Thursday for day 2 of the draft. Be sure to follow along with Four Feathers podcast for all of that coverage throughout the course of the next few days. And then my personal Christmas morning, but the NHL free agency period opens on Saturday, July 1st. There will surely be moves made by the Blackhawks if I was a betting man. So be sure, again, Bulls, Blackhawks, be following those. And Bears, yes, we're in the lull of the summer, but before you know it, training camp will be here, and we'll all be talking about what this Bears team is going to look like this season. So be sure to follow Bears on Tap as well as Bear Nation Pod. Follow those boys too. And yes, Cubs fans, you know the deal. We all have friends that like the Southsiders. Send your friends to our friends and tell them to check out Sox on Tap. Once again, ontapsportsnet.com, at ontapsportsnet on social media. The On Tap Sports Network. Go ahead and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Juice, a loss sucks, but a show with you is always a pleasure, my friend. What do you say we get out of here? The only way we know at Cubs on Tap.
Fuck the Cardinals. And Buzz, that's bullshit if you're rooting for them.
I agree. fuck the Cardinals. If Buzz really does feel that way, just for temporary reasons, fuck him too. And let's go Cubbies.